Tididi. Text by Christine Miles. Illustrations by Philip Webb. Aidan and his twin, Sarah, find graffiti all over their garage door. When a passerby shows an unusual interest in their misfortune, Aidan decides to investigate. But investigating a crime isn't as easy as he thought. Tididi. Text by Christine Miles. Illustrations by Philip Webb. Chapter 1. Friday was one of those days that should have been perfect from the moment I rolled out of bed until the moment I fell back in. It was the end of the first week of the school holidays. It started off pretty good. Mum was making pancakes and scrambled eggs. The smell of pancakes, plus Dad singing in the shower, woke me, and for a moment I felt grumpy. Then I remembered that the early start was all in good fun. Today Dad was taking the day off, and we were going quad bike riding. It was going to be a boys-only day. Wahoo! Sarah had been fussing all week about wanting to come, but Dad and Mum stood their ground. Even I didn't give in to Sarah's promises of generosity if I could convince our parents to let her come too. Sarah is my twin. Nobody will tell us who is the older of the two of us. Sarah is louder than me. She's faster than me. She's smarter than me. And she's taller than me. Strangers often think I am her younger brother, which I am, if Sarah's tales are to be believed, because the top of my head fits just beneath Sarah's chin. We ate our breakfast, Dad and Mum and me. Then Dad checked off on his fingers all the things we needed to take with us, while Mum made sandwiches and wrapped big slices of chocolate cake for our lunch. Sarah's taking a long time to wake up, Mum said, as she stowed our lunch in the esky. Go tell her to get up, Aidan. So I did. And that's when the first thing went wrong. As I went leaping and yahooing across the room and through the doorway, I crashed into Dad. Dad has never been one for quiet suffering. If he's sick, everyone knows about it. And when he's hurt himself, well, the neighbours know about it too. Not that he was really hurt. Winded, perhaps. But the noise woke Sarah, and she started up her endless whine about wanting to come too. It was while Dad was moaning, and Sarah was whining, and Mum was explaining for the 50 millionth time why it was just Dad and Aidan going out, that the doorbell rang. Said Mrs. Pringle from next door. You don't want to know this, and I don't really want to be the one to tell you, but you've been tagged. She stepped back and waved her walking stick at our garage door. I'm really sorry, but I thought you'd want to know sooner rather than later. Chapter 2. I couldn't believe it. I had been woken at least 4 times in the night by the sound of rain hammering at the window, wind gusts scraping the camellia bush against the fence, and thunder and lightning doing their tandem thing. Yet somehow, in the middle of the stormy night, someone had painted big fat letters all over our garage door. Okay, Super Sleuth, Sarah hissed, while Mum scraped at the paint with her fingernails and Dad took photographs. Look at those letters. What do they spell? And why do you think it happened to us? I sat on the letterbox and tried to make sense of the letters. They didn't really say anything, although they could have been names. Even tipping my head to the side or trying to read the letters backwards didn't make much sense. Yet I felt there was a message there waiting to be unscrambled. Okay, Aidan, we'll get on our way, Dad said. Nothing for this mess but to paint over the top of it. And we can't buy any paint today, so we may as well go and enjoy ourselves. We'll need to scrape some of this paint off before we can repaint, Mum said. Perhaps that would be a good job for Sarah, Dad said as I loaded myself into the car gleefully. But as I strapped myself in, I saw that Dad was still standing there. He was staring at the ground, or so I thought. "What is it, Dad?" I asked. "Bad news, I'm afraid. The front tyre is as flat as a pancake," Dad said, kicking the wheel. "Gee," he went on. "Look, mate, we'll do this trip next weekend. By the time we've had a new tyre fitted, the day will be half gone." I sat frozen to my seat, the seat belt pressing a sharp line across my chest. Nothing was going right, and I just knew that now I was going to be the lucky one helping Sarah scrape paint from the garage door. Chapter 3. While I scraped at the paint, Sarah stood around offering advice and chatting to people walking past. "What a way to spend the day," said one passerby. "If I knew who they were," Sarah said, "I would make them clean this mess. And since they like painting so much, I would make them paint the bathroom ceiling. Goodness knows it needs doing." "Aidan," she said to me when no one was around, "I'm sorry you didn't get to go quad bike riding." Why didn't I believe her? She sounded genuine enough. But I had a feeling deep in my gut that Sarah had done something to the car to stop our trip. It was a terrible thought, and one I hoped wasn't true. She was a bossy one, all right, but she'd never before set me up to miss out on something. I kept scraping for about 3 minutes and was about to call it a day when a bright purple car screeched to a stop outside our house and a young guy jumped out. "Have you taken a picture?" he said, waving his mobile phone around. "My house got hit last month. The police think they know the culprits, but there's not enough evidence. Without proof, the police can't catch anyone, and these guys need to be arrested. Your graffiti looks exactly the same as mine. Blue, green and gold paint and everything." There was something strange about this guy. He never stopped to take a breath. Plus, I could have sworn he held his mobile still for long enough to get a picture of our garage door. "Dad took pictures," I said. "Oh, all right then. Leave you to it." He waved as he ran back to his car, revved it loudly, did a 180-degree turn and took off. "He was very helpful," Sarah said. "Nice to see someone trying to beat crime." I stared at Sarah for a long time as she watched the purple car until it was out of sight. For someone who was supposed to be so clever, she was behaving in a very dim-witted way. Either that or my itsy-bitsy hint of a suspicion was way wrong. Chapter 4. I threw the scraper on the grass. "I'm not doing this anymore," I said. "I'm going to find out who did it." "Yeah, right," Sarah said. "Whatever." I fixed her with an intent gaze. "I'm serious. Don't make fun of me." "Didn't you hear, Dad?" Sarah flicked her ponytail over her shoulder. "He's going to report it to the police, but only because he wants to make an insurance claim. The police don't care about graffiti. Nobody ever catches these guys. I bet you don't find the culprit." I grinned at Sarah and tapped on the garage door. "I bet you I do. And when I do, I want that $25 book voucher you won last week." Sarah gaped. "That's too much." But then a cunning grin spread slowly across her face. "You've got 2 days to find the villain," she said, "and if you don't find him, you owe me $25. She flicked her hair over her shoulder again and tipped her nose in the air as she walked away. I scrunched my nose at her. Not only is she louder, faster, smarter and taller than me, my sister is a drama queen. Chapter 5. "Mum, I'm going for a bike ride," I shouted as I buckled my helmet. "Take your sister," Mum called. "Aw, you're not going by yourself." "What if she doesn't want to come with me?" Mum, I do want to go for a ride. Aiden won't let me. Aiden? I rolled my eyes and slumped my shoulders. Silly girl. She tried to stop me getting any clues. Oh well, I just wouldn't tell her what I was looking for. I rode away from the house fast, trying to lose Sarah. I was going to ride around the block, on the lookout for any other houses that may have been vandalised overnight. Sarah rode close behind me. I had to admit she was a good rider. I was getting out of breath, so I slowed down. Sarah rode alongside me. Look, Aiden, I'm sorry I've been a pain, and I'd love to find out who painted the graffiti too. Can we forget our bet and search for clues together? We'd solved 2 mysteries in the past year. Mrs. Pringle had wanted to know where her cat had disappeared to, and the school principal had wanted to know who was turning on all the outside taps before he got to school every morning. Sarah and I were a good team. But Sarah had possibly ruined my day of quad biking with Dad. I couldn't forgive her. So I mumbled at my pedals, I'm looking for more graffiti. Well, you won't find any down there, she said. And that was what made us friends again, roaring with laughter as we pedalled into the breeze, around the corner and through the park. Chapter 6. We didn't find any more graffiti, but we did see the purple car parked on the street outside a beat-up house with a broken letterbox and long grass growing through the cracks in the path. Strange number plate, I said to Sarah. Idiot. I wonder who gave it to him. Not the kind of thing to buy yourself, Sarah agreed. If you bought me a plate like that, I wouldn't even use it, I said. Bet you would, Sarah said. Just 'cause you love me. Ha! We pedalled on in silence for a minute, and then I braked suddenly. What? Sarah said. I want to look inside the car. What car? Idiot's car. Don't call him that, Sarah said. He was so helpful. Your choice, I said. If I find the guy by myself, you still owe me that money. We decided to take the bikes home, then walk back to Idiot's house. I didn't know how we would feel if we were caught peering in the window of his car, and I thought we might see more if we walked past slowly. I'm getting my wallet, I said as we parked our bikes. I might need an ice block. Dad had downloaded the pictures of the garage onto the computer. Take a look at this, Aiden, he said. He'd taken the pictures from across the street. As I looked at the screen, I suddenly recognised 2 words. They were so obvious I couldn't believe I hadn't recognised them close up. The top line said Zach. The middle line looked like Danny or Diacly. I couldn't make any sense of the bottom line. Tididi. Tididi? Someone had been reading too many fairy tales. Come on, Sarah shouted from outside. Let's go. We walked past the car once. I could see nothing inside it except for a chocolate wrapper on the back seat. Idiot sat in the front room of the house watching TV. He didn't see us, but we decided to get ice blocks from Mr. Smith's shop before coming back for a second look. Idiot's friends were standing in his driveway, yahooing and congratulating Idiot when we came back. What'll we do? Whispered Sarah. Keep walking. My legs suddenly felt wobbly. He doesn't know we suspect him. He'll recognise us. Don't look at him. I hope my knees wouldn't give out in front of Idiot's house. Sarah and I pretended to be very interested in our ice blocks, but our ears were on full alert. Great job, man, said a short, pimply guy in a red hat. Yes, whistled his greasy-haired friend. Got another job for you tonight, Zach, said the pimple. Idiot raised his hand in a high-five salute. "It's my pleasure," he said. We turned down the next street and into the park. It would take us longer to get home, but at least we'd be out of Zach's sight. "Race you home," Sarah said. So I ran faster than ever before, and I beat her. Chapter 7. We sat on the back steps and ate grapes. Finding the guys who painted graffiti on our garage door had been too easy. We had wanted the thrill of the chase, but in one short afternoon it was over. Dad was mowing the lawn. We would tell him of our find when he turned the mower off. Sarah had eaten 19 grapes, and I had eaten 16 when Dad ambled over, pulling the earmuffs from his ears. "What's up?" he said. "We found the bad guy," Sarah said. "Bad guys," I said. Dad raised his eyebrows. "Is that right?" "Yep." And we told him all about the strange conversation we had had that morning with the guy with the mobile phone who drove a car with a number plate that said idiot, but whose name was actually Zach. So now we thought we would call the police and tell them we found out who wrote on our door, and they can go to jail, I said. "It's not as simple as that," Dad said. "You've got to catch them in the act because you need to be able to prove it. But by the sound of his friends, you need to keep away from them. You understand?" "But Dad—" "I mean it," Dad said. "The police don't have time to prosecute every vandal in town, and I don't want you kids getting hurt. Stay away from them." "They should be punished," I muttered as Dad put his earmuffs back on and yanked the lawnmower cord. "They're the ones who broke the law, not us." I grabbed another grape and bit into it without looking. It was overripe and put a rotten taste in my mouth, quite a lot like the rotten feeling I had about Zach. I spat it out and followed Sarah into the house. What a start to the weekend. Chapter 8. The next morning I woke really early. After dressing quickly, I walked into the kitchen to see Dad eating his breakfast and watching the news. "I'm going for a ride," I said. He glanced at the clock, then outside. I knew what he was thinking. "It's light, Dad," I said. "Look, the sun is coming up." A thin streak of colour edged the horizon as Dad shook his head. "Dad," I said, "they'll be tucked up in their own beds now. You're the one who said crime happens in the middle of the night." "I said crime happens most often in the middle of the night," Dad said. "Subtle difference." And he shoveled another spoonful of cereal into his mouth. "I totally promised not to talk to anyone," I said. And when Dad raised his eyebrows, I added, "And I'll be back in 10 minutes. Dad glanced out of the window again. "Which way are you going?" "That way," I said, pointing. Then I tied my laces as fast as I could. Zach had been given another job. I hoped it would be local. I had memorised the letters on our door, so even if he used a different paint colour, I would recognise his work. Mum came in as I pulled on my jacket. "Take my camera," she said. "You'll need it to record the evidence." There was no fresh graffiti on any of the houses in our street. I turned onto Amberford Drive. I would ride to the end of the street, then go home. There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. I had been betting on a house on a busy street being hit, or the shops, or the playground across from the shops. Nothing. I went home. At 10 o'clock, Mum had had enough. "Look, Aidan," she said, "it's really hard to find a vandal. You won't find him doing his thing during the day, and we're not letting you wander the streets in the dark. Get your shoes on. We're going out." "But Mum," I moaned, "I'm going to lose the bet if I don't prove that Zach is the culprit." "No, you won't," Mum said. "We don't do bets in this house. And anyway, The bet was that you'd find the culprit, and you've done that. It would be great indeed if that was the way Sarah operated. She'd said that the bet was off if I let her help me. I had let her help, but now she was doing her own thing, and I still wanted to get Zack and his friends caught. Give it up. We're going to the park for a picnic, Mum said. Mum was always going on about the great need to work hard to achieve one's goals, even when it seemed they couldn't be achieved. And here I was, working as hard as they'd let me, and it wasn't enough. And they wouldn't let me do more. Right. I would go to the picnic and stuff my face with hot dogs, but I'd be watching for more clues too, even if it was broad daylight. Chapter 9. Mum was chatting with Mrs. Sutton at the picnic. You'll never believe it, Mum said. I drove over a bottle when I came home on Thursday night and smashed it. The tyre was flat by morning, of course. Mum drove over a bottle? And I'd been thinking Sarah had deliberately ruined my quad biking trip. I felt really small, about as big as a snail, but with only half the brains. Mark Sutton, who was 2 years older than me, rummaged in the picnic basket. "Where's the food, Mum?" he said. "I'm starving." "You're always starving," Mrs. Sutton laughed. "I'll cut you a piece of pie." Mark grinned and sat down, taking off his hat to wipe his sweaty forehead. Something looked strange about him. It was his hair. Gold flecks sparkled in his hair. For a moment, I thought it was glitter, and then it hit me. Dad's hair looked like that after he'd painted the gutters. Had Mark painted our garage door? I wouldn't jump to conclusions. I wouldn't. I'd been wrong about Sarah, and I could be wrong about Mark. Mum and Mrs. Sutton were friends. Why would Mark vandalise our garage door? While I was thinking about everything that had happened in the last few days, Mark pulled a bag of lollies out of his pocket. "Can I have one of those?" I asked. "Sure," Mark said. "If you come and help me scrape the graffiti off our fence, you can have the whole bag." Now it made sense. I didn't want all his lollies, but I did want to see what the vandals had done to Mark's fence. Mum wanted to look too, so we walked back to the Suttons' place together. "Tididi, I said. If anything, it looked worse than our graffiti. Zack had used more paint and he'd written the letters bigger. It looked like he'd dropped the spray can too. The grass was drenched in gold." "What does Tididi mean?" Mum said. I shrugged. I had hoped Mum might have an idea. Chapter 10. I asked Sarah if she'd had any bright ideas about catching Zack in action. She hadn't. She'd forgotten the whole thing. She was more interested in ripping the pictures from her walls and replacing them with posters from a magazine she'd picked up somewhere. "I suppose our deal is definitely off then," I said as I stood in her bedroom doorway. "Deal?" She looked at me blankly. "Oh, that? Yeah, that was a silly idea. It's off." I jumped on the trampoline for a while, thinking about Zack and Sarah and deals and vandalism. Was there any point proving that Zack did it? I decided to keep jumping until someone made me stop, all the while chanting, "I will, I won't." The last jump would be the message. I will, I won't. I will, I won't. I will, I won't. I will, I won't. The neighbour's dog barked furiously on the other side of the fence. One day he would jump right over. I was sure of it. I will, I won't. I will, I won't. I will. How long would it be before Mum got sick of the dog barking? I won't. I will. I won't. I will. I won't. Aiden, come inside and help me. Will. Yes. I punched my fist into the air. Sure, Mum. Help you what? I don't know. I just want that dog to be quiet. I will, I will, I will, I will. How? Chapter 11. That night Dad surprised me. I'm going to Greg's to watch the footy game, he said. Do you want to come? Did I what? Dad always watched the Sunday night game at Uncle Greg's place on pay TV. He'd never taken me before. Can you get some milk on the way home? Mum said. Aiden, make sure Dad remembers. I snuck a look at Sarah, but she didn't seem to be taking any notice. I guess she didn't think watching footy sounded as much fun as riding quad bikes. It was late when we left Greg's. The game had been great and we'd feasted on pizza. I slouched down in the front seat on the way home and closed my eyes, thinking about everything that had happened that day. I sat up with a start. Milk, Dad, I said. Don't forget the milk. Oh yeah, Dad yawned. It's too cold out there. You can get it in the morning. Mum would be livid. Nah, Dad, Mum said get it tonight. Mum might want. All right, Dad said. We'll get it at Mr. Smith's. I slouched back into my seat as Dad pulled up at Mr. Smith's shop. I was tired. Dad must have been waiting for Mr. Smith to milk the cow it took him so long. Which turned out to be a good thing because Zach drove past, parked his car between two streetlights, hopped out and ran into the playground across from the shop. I forgot it was 11 p.m. All I could think was that Zach was doing more damage and I needed to catch him. If I'd used my brain, I would have quietly got out of the car, gone into the shop, found Dad, and we'd have caught the criminal red-handed. Instead, I grabbed the camera from beneath the seat, leapt out of the car, ran to a tree, and waited for my eyes to become used to the dark. When I could see enough, I scanned the area for Zach. He stood there, spray can in hand, more cans at his feet. I-D-I. Zach carefully sprayed the letters onto the wall, starting at the right and working towards the left. Didn't the guy know how to write like everyone else? It wasn't until Zach began the last I that it clicked. I did it. Tididi. Zach's number plate didn't say idiot at all. The O was a D. I did it. More proof. Yes! My heart banged so loudly I could feel it in my shoes. It was a wonder Zach didn't think there was an earthquake. I crept closer to the playground, camera at the ready. If Zach saw me, I'd have to take the picture and run. I was so close, I could have taken 2 big steps and touched Zach on the shoulder. Then I heard a car door bang shut. Then squeaking hinges screaming against each other as the door opened again and a voice shouted into the night. Aiden! There was a pause and then another shout. Aiden! I hadn't thought about what Dad would do if he got to the car and I was gone. Zach wheeled around when he heard Dad shout and there I was, right in his face. Click! Flash! What the? He said, making a grab for me. And that was when I realised Zach wasn't alone. Even then I should have made a wild dash for Dad, but Zach's mates were between us, and I knew I would get caught if I tried to get through them. So I ran away, across the playing field, down a walkway, and over the fence into a prickly garden. Chapter 12. I held my breath as Zach and his friends hurried by on the other side of the fence. A wandering cat followed them for a short distance, trying to rub herself on Zach's leg. The wail of sirens filled the night air as I crouched beneath a bush. Were the police looking for me or Zach? Achoo! I didn't even have time to cover my face with my sleeve to try and muffle the sound. Zach bent down to pat the cat as he looked around. He stared in my direction. Another sneeze tickled my nose, but I dared not let it escape. "Come on, Zach," yelled one of his friends. "Stop messing with that cat." Zach stared at the bush where I was hiding for a moment longer, then picked up his spray can and ran after his mates. Once they'd gone, I headed for Mr. Smith's. Dad was still at the shop when I got back. So were 3 police officers. So were Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith and the Smith grandparents. Dad was on the phone to Mum, trying to remember what I was wearing so the police could identify me. "I'm here," I said. The police asked me where I had been. I told them about our garage door and about Zach and his friends. I showed them the digital picture I had taken across the street at the playground. I told them about Zach's car and where he lived. I waited for them to tell me I was a tattletale. "Your persistence has paid off," said one of the police officers. He looked at Dad and then back at me. "You guys go home. We've got a couple of places to check out, then we'll be in touch." Dad and I went home where we retold the whole saga to Mum and Sarah. "I wish I'd been there," Sarah said. Mum frowned at her. "What do we say about keeping out of trouble?" she said. "Aiden's done a good deed for the community," Sarah said. "I know," Mum said, "but it could have turned out very—" The doorbell rang. A police officer stood at the door. "We've got them," he said. They were at the school, quite easily identified because they had sprayed a stripe on each other's faces. "If you could confirm their identity, we can charge them with vandalism and intimidation immediately." So we all had a ride in a police car, unfortunately not with the siren going, to where Zach and his friends sat on the steps outside the school hall, with their hands cuffed behind their backs, their striped faces glowing in the police headlights. The story was on the front page of the newspaper that week. Mrs. Pringle came over with a batch of biscuits. "Good boy," she said. "Every community needs people like you." Mrs. Sutton and Mark came by. Mrs. Sutton patted me on the head, then shook my hand. Mark grinned. "Zach is going to paint our whole fence." Mum and Dad promised me a camera of my own for my next birthday. But it was what Sarah said that stuck in my mind. "Hey, little brother, you can be the same age as me now." I could have sworn my eyes were level with hers. Book cover maker. Design a book cover for Tididi. Type your name, then click on Next. Type the name of your class, then click on Next. Type a sentence to describe the book, then click on Next. Use the tools on the left to design your own book cover. If you need help, click on the Help button. Now design the back cover. Check your spelling, then click Print. If you need help, click on the Help button. Play the great word game. Play against the computer or again. Write your name and click Next. Guess 5 words from Tididi. What's the word? Use the keyboard to type the word. You lose points for a wrong letter. You win points for each correct letter. Yes, you got it. The word was graffiti. What's the word? Yes, you got it. The word was magazine. What's the word? Yes, you got it. The word was trampoline. What's the word? Yes, you got it. The word was grapes. What's the word? Yes, you got it. The word was pancakes. Great word work. Click Print to print your results or play again.